G'day mate, welcome to Cabinet Industry with me, Jadit. Today we're going to be talking about farming. Everything farming. Everything from the 4 different farm types to, of course, all the different crop options. We're going to talk about the fertility, along with the fertilizer, along with the water needs. We're going to be covering absolutely everything, including, because I was curious myself, what type of crop goes on what type of belt. We're covering everything farming today. But before we get to the meat of it, I do want to cover some basic things first. One, can I borrow a like? I just want to borrow a like. I just want to borrow a like for now. By all means, I'll remind you later in the video. You can have it back if you didn't think the video was helpful, you didn't like the video, you didn't find it informative. By all means, you can have it back. At the same time, I'm going to remind you guys that we don't do any mid-roll ads. Why don't I do mid-roll ads? Because rather than filling the video full of ads, especially with a tutorial video like this, that's going to have a whole lot of information along with a whole bunch of chapters, great spots to put mid-rolls, I'm going to ask that you consider supporting the channel. Why do I ask that? Well, because it's quite simple. I don't enjoy watching ads. I'm sure you don't enjoy watching ads, but, you know, as a content creator, that's generally how I make most of my income. I'm choosing this year to try something different, and I'm doing that by asking you guys to consider becoming a YouTube member. YouTube member starts off at $1 per month, gets you early access to the videos, also gets you a couple of other perks, and like I said, starts off at $1 per month. If everybody who watched this video threw in $1 per month, I wouldn't have to put this at the start of the video. At the same time, if YouTube membership's not your thing, you don't want YouTube hitting up your credit card every month, you can always go across to Patreon and just do a whole 12 months up front over there. Like I said, everything starts off at like $1 or $2, and then from there, it's as high as you want to go. What do you think the videos are worth? Anyway, I do want to remind you, there's chapters down the bottom. If you want to come back and refer to the video, you need to jump back, forward, all that sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of chapters down the bottom, but I recommend you watch the video at least once, start to end, because there's a lot to cover when it comes to farms. All right, so let's start off with our 4 different farm types. We have the basic farm. The basic farm is good for, well, crops. That's all it's got going for it. It relies on rainwater. It doesn't require maintenance. That's sort of all its perks and its cons in one small bucket load. Next up, we have the irrigated farm. The irrigated farm is going to become your backbone of farming. As soon as you can get these up and running and even give them an intermittent supply of water, you're going to end up swapping across to irrigated farms just because you can turn on the sprinklers should you have a dry patch. Okay, next up we're going to have the greenhouse. Greenhouse, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more wonderful. Does get out bonus crops. It's going to give you an extra 25% yield from your crops. Also, it's going to cost you 13% extra water and also 13% extra fertility. Not fertilizer, fertility. We'll explain the difference shortly. And of course, then we have our Greenhouse 2. Greenhouse 2 is one better again. It does 50% extra yield from your crops, but is going to cost you 25% extra fertility and water. Okay, that's going to be, you know, the quick rundown on the 4 different farms. I do need to note that the irrigated farm can grow just about everything, but there's a couple of things you need a greenhouse for. They are, of course, sugarcane, along with the fruit and poppy seeds and flowers. So next question is, obviously, what goes on the different types of belts? Well, the greenhouse is a perfect example because it has access to everything, and it is veggies, fruit, and flowers. They are the 3 that go on the flat belt. Everything else goes on a U-shaped belt. So as long as you remember what goes on a flat belt, or you can always come back and refer to this in this video, then now you know what goes on the U-shaped belt. Do want to mention very, very quickly that obviously with the irrigated farm, you can plumb water into it. Now, what actually happens is when the soil water level gets too low, the sprinklers kick in. Obviously, inside the greenhouse, they also have sprinklers, but it does mean if it's raining, obviously the sprinkler system's not running, you're not spending any town water to feed the farms. There's one other bonus that the greenhouses do have that they don't really tell you about, and that is on a sunny day like today, they actually lose soil water at 50% the speed of which a irrigated farm loses water. So something to keep in mind if you're in a particularly sunny climate, i.e. you set the map settings that way, then upgrading greenhouses can obviously give a big benefit. Let's talk about soil fertility. Soil fertility starts off at 100%, and then it falls from there depending on what crops you plant. So obviously different crops have different fertility costs. Some are nice, some are a little bit harsher on the soil. Now, we do also have a penalty. There is a crop penalty from not rotating crops. So if you just keep planting potatoes over and over and over, rather than them consuming 10.5, you're going to get a 50% penalty, bringing it up to 15.8. Now, a lot of people have suggested we put in the rest cycle. So this is an empty cycle for 3 months, plant no crops, which should give you just the natural replenishment for that 3-month cycle. Natural replenishment is the farm trying to get back to 100%. It's always trying to get back to 100%, wants to get to 100% at all times. The catch is putting in a no crop, a resting the soil, doesn't remove that penalty. We've still got 15.8 here and 15.8 here. So I don't know if that's a bug or a feature, but it is what it is. The other thing you might notice is the average production for this just planting potatoes over and over and over is 12.8. Over here, it's also 12.8, even though we're doing nothing for 3 months and potatoes for 3 months. Yeah, this doesn't actually update with the planting of nothing, and that's definitely a bug. The devs will fix it, I'm sure. Next up, we actually have your best option, at least the best option, early game, at least before you get deep into crop rotation. So you can rotate crops with green manure. Green manure is going to cost you a little bit of water per month and actually gives you a bonus to fertility. So it's going to do the natural replenishment plus an extra 3.6 every single cycle. So if I planted just that and nothing but that, I can actually get the fertility over 100%. Sure, I'm not growing anything except grass, but it is an option. Now, what I normally recommend very, very early on, until you want to play with multiple crops, is you can put in just potatoes with some green manure, and we can see we're going to get 12.8 here. Just doing this is going to bring the average production up to 13.6. Also, at the same time, do want to mention it actually uses less water than just running potatoes. Now, I actually have 2 farms here. They are exactly identical, except this one has a cut-off water supply. The water's a little bit low. It doesn't bring the water up as fast as it should. There is one catch with running this green manure cycle, and that is it doesn't start planting until it has water. Also means, so waiting for rain or water, there we go. So it's not actually going to plant until it has enough water stocks. Also means that we have 63 potatoes here, and I don't have a potato cycle to click at. Yeah, okay. Well, we're already at 67, 68, and going up, down, left, or right. Also means the fertility, you don't get that bonus fertility from the green crop for those times where it doesn't have water. So just something you need to keep in mind. But overall, it's better than having the penalty for not rotating the crops. Okay, fertility equilibrium. Fertility equilibrium is made up of everything in the crop cycle. So if I have corn, which has a penalty cost of 12, and then I add in soybeans, let's say, it'll update both these numbers, also update the equilibrium. If we then throw in, say, potatoes and also a natural replenishment, we can get a fertility up to 66.1. And it's going to update these average stats. Now, the average stats do make a couple of assumptions. One, they assume that you're at the fertility equilibrium. Obviously, I'm adding fertility with the green crop, and then I'm subtracting it with the corn, and then devastating it with the soybeans. Soybeans are absolutely horrible for the crop, for the fertility, and they're going to drag it much lower, which means this 1.6 is very, very wrong. It's going to be much lower than this on an average, because when the soybeans are actually growing, the fertility is going to be much lower. Right at the moment, we've got 13 in 3.7 months. And in fact, that's still going down. It's going to keep going down. We're going to have way less than 13 come out the other end. So that is something you need to keep in mind. The average production stats are wrong. Wrong is probably the best way of putting it. And the only way you're going to get a true number is coming in towards the end of the month. Towards the end of the month, this is going to get more accurate. The only way to get a true number is clicking on the harvest stats, so we can see, okay, I only got 41 corn, when really I should get 4.7 multiplied by 4 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months. So what's that? 4.3 times, 4.7 times 12 months. Yeah, I probably should have got a little bit more than 41 out of that deal. So yeah, this is not entirely accurate. You want an accurate number, you're going to wait till it's actually been harvested, click the harvest stats, and then you know exactly what numbers you need to deal with. Again, crop yields are, they're worked out daily. So all calculations happen daily when it comes to your farms, and they have, of course, calculated daily according to what the fertility is, whether or not they have water, all those sorts of things. So again, that is something you definitely need to keep in mind, that a couple of days worth of shortage of either artificial fertilizer or water can make a devastating effect on your crops. We got 14 in the end. Yep. Okay. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the natural replenish. So naturally replenish means that the farms are always trying to get back to 100%, like I said. Now, the lower the number is, the quicker they naturally replenish per month. So as we can see, this one's doing horrible. It's currently at 52%, and it's trying to replenish 14% per month. So we're actually getting a sort of a bonus out of this one because we're being so mean to the soil. It's replenishing faster. The catch is it means all the yields are also lower compared to this one, which has a much higher overall fertility, which means the natural replenish is much lower. So you tell me, is it better to have a lot of farms being devastated or a lot of farms we're being very, very nice to? I have a feeling it's a lot of farms being very, very nice to, but it does mean that you want to keep in mind your natural replenish rate and also your order of crops when you're planting them, because that's going to define what their yields are going to be. All right, your other option is, of course, artificial fertilizer. So once you get artificial fertilizer, you can plumb it into the system, and you need to actually plumb it into here. The trucks won't automatically deliver it. There we go, words. Okay, now when we bring in fertilizer, the average production is made up of how many months this is in the soil, plus also calculation on the fertility equilibrium. So obviously, if I drag this up to 100%, it's going to change that average number, even though I'm not bringing any fertilizer in. But to make sure you're using fertilizer, 1, you need to plumb it in. 2, you need to drag this bar to whatever you decide. So we have 3 different types of fertilizer. We obviously have the natural fertilizer, the organic fertilizer. The organic fertilizer gives you a max fertilization rate of 100%, and each fertilizer is worth 1%. So if I target this at 100%, we can see just planting nothing but potatoes non-stop means I need a fertility needed at 15.8, offset this 15.8. I have a natural replenish rate of just 0.1% because I'm supporting it with artificial fertilizer. If I drag this down and this got lower, we can see we get some sort of bonus out of natural fertility, and obviously would save some fertilizer. At the same time, we still have that fertility equilibrium, i.e. if we had no fertilizer, this is what it would drop down to. Okay, then of course we have fertilizer number 2, fertilizer 1 rather. Fertilizer 1 has a max fertility of 120%. Also, each fertilizer is now worth 2%, so it's worth twice as much. Therefore, we have to plumb in half as much. And again, whatever I set this bar to affects the averages. But more importantly, if I drag this to 120%, we can see we've got 20% extra yield due to bonus fertility. The catch is my natural replenishment now is down to minus 1.1. Why? Because the farms always want to go back to 100%. So we're actually, because we're boosting it up, we're actually having a penalty now of negative 1.1 natural replenishment, which means 1% of my 1%. Half of fertilizer is being wasted in just trying to counteract the fact that it's naturally deplenishing the fertility. All right, next up we have, of course, the Fertilizer 2. Fertilizer 2, the uber powerful one. This will let you go all the way up to 140%. Again, one fertilizer is still worth 2% total, and I can drag this bar all the way up here. Also means my harvest stats are now through the roof. We're getting 113 compared to over here we're getting 97. We have the same amount of water going in. The water value hasn't changed. The only difference is I'm artificially boosting the amount of crops I'm getting by having bonus fertilizer. Fertility. Those two words are going to get confused. I apologize. All right. As we can see here, because I boosted so high, my natural replenishment is actually at minus 2.3. So I'm losing one fertilizer every month, just negating the natural fertility going down. It also means I'm actually paying a significant amount more. We're paying, well, over here I'm paying 15.8. Over here I'm paying 23.3 units of fertilizer per month. Well, half that because each one's worth 2. Yeah. And over here I'm paying 30.8, which means I'm going through about 15 fertilizer 2 per month, compared to over here I was also going through 15 per month. But this pops out due to lack of water. Okay, so we got 81, and over here I got out whatever that is, 113 for 15 units of fertilizer. All depends on whether I'm using organic or fertilizer 2. Okay, so the only thing I want to ask you guys is it better to have a lower number of farms with more natural replenishment, or have a few farms and max them out? I don't know. You guys tell me down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, next up we have a couple of farms. We have a couple of best practices. So best practices is, it's generally good to run a harsh crop. In the case of this, we're using soybeans, which have a fertility needed of 15 right after a green cycle. So we're going to use a green cycle to boost the fertility up before we plant in our harsh soybeans. And as we can see, I got 22 when out of a full crop, I would have got 31. So it's not a bad deal. But there's a couple of other options we could do. We could just plant two farms overall with potatoes and soybeans. And rather than us getting an average of 3.7, I'm going to average of 2.5 out of two farms, which technically means I'm going to get more soybeans out of these two farms than I will out of this one. I'll also not do a green cycle and get out bonus potatoes. Well, 45, 46. Actually, that's going up because the fertility is going up. Come on, go faster. Of course, you're in different cycles. Okay, let's see this. You got 47, so you're going to end up at 47. And you got 18 soybeans compared to this one, which got, I missed it, 22, 18, 18, 22, somewhere there. 18, 19, whatever it was. So we'd actually get more crops out of having two different farms. There we go, 18 out of that one and 17 out of that one. Okay, this one's lacking water and that one's not. Good, good, excellent. So it can work out very much in your benefit to have two different farms doing two crops rather than just trying to have the crops rest to boost the overall fertility, because as you can see, my fertility equilibrium between these two is lower than just having one rest. But that's not all. There's more. This is a good point where we're far enough into the video, definitely, that I ask, you know, you've seen enough of the video so far, a good majority of the video so far. We got a couple more tips I need to throw in. Is it worth that like? Are you happy with your like? Can I keep the like? Or do you want to take it back? I only ask because we've covered most of the topics so far. We've definitely covered everything except really the average water. I need to throw in a few more bits for the average water. But, you know, we've covered most of the video. So, can I keep your like? Or if you didn't leave a like earlier, now can I suggest it's a great time to leave a like, maybe subscribe to the channel at the same time, so you can catch the next tutorial video, because we're just covering farms now. There's going to be a future video covering food. Food's a whole different topic. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next farm. Next farm, we've done something a little bit different. We're still doing the potato and soybean recipe. The difference is I have a green cycle in here. And the idea of the green cycle is it's going to push the fertility up before we actually start planting the soybeans. So we're going to actually start with a higher fertility overall, along with a, in theory, higher fertility equilibrium overall. And we're going to start with 26. Obviously, that number is going to drop lower, but it's not going to get down to 18. Okay, it does mean that the average is now down to 2.3 rather than 2.5, but I actually have a feeling when it all washes out, they're going to be roughly around about the same. So that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Maybe it's better to have a green manure cycle. Green manure cycle before actually running these, you know, a harsh cycle like soybeans. Last thing I do need to mention once again is the crops are calculated daily. So consequently, we can see that this number is going to go up and down depending on where the fertility starts. Also, what fertilizer you're feeding in. So you need to make sure that, you know, if you're going to put fertilizer in, hopefully you keep it fairly common, fairly regular. Also, water supply, you really don't want to cut off the water supply. If you cut off the water supply, some crops it's a month, other crops it's half a month. Some crops are happy to last a couple of months without water. Bad things do happen, and you won't lose the whole yield, but what actually happens is you run the harvest now button. Okay, the farmers decide to harvest the crops early, and you'll get 50% of what's in the soil potentially. You know, it's a little bit higher. I think it actually rounds out at about 75%. No, at 21. We're almost done. There we go. Okay, and harvest stats, we got 22, whereas these guys are getting, I can't see. Oh, that one will tell me. These guys are getting 17 each. So, you know, maybe it's better to run that green cycle. All depends on what crops you're rotating and in what order you're rotating them. Can make a very, very large difference to what your final yields are. Okay, next thing we need to mention very, very quickly is the average water need. Now, the average water need is an average water need depending on your different crops you have planted. So in my case, I actually have sugarcane and I have vegetables. The catch is the average water need comes out at 53.9, but when I actually bring them up, we're going to see that sugarcane needs 60 water every 60, whereas the vegetables only need 40, which means for 9 months, I'm going to have a very high water supply crop, and then for 4 months, I'm going to have a very low supply water crop. We could even make that worse by changing you out for canola, at which point my average water goes down even lower. Well, it doesn't really move that much because this is such a short crop, but it also doesn't need a lot of water. So I end up with 3 months of water gluttony and then obviously 9 months worth of water shortages if I just work on that average water need. So you do need to make sure that when you line up your farms, when you hook up water, you either make sure you have extra water or potentially add some tanks along the way just to store up a little bit of extra water along the way. So with all that said, I'm pretty sure that's where we're going to leave this video. I've covered just about everything I can with farms, fertility, fertilizer, natural equilibrium, how much fertility we need, average water, average production stats, harvest stats. We've done just about everything. Do remember, of course, greenhouses, bonus food, cost of, bonus water, and bonus fertility, which means you're going to drag that natural replenishment number down much further depending on what you plant. You can make that up, of course, with artificial fertilizer. Artificial fertilizer, organic is a byproduct. Trying to make it is awfully difficult. Fertilizer 1 and Fertilizer 2 generally come from the oil section. I do have a whole dedicated video called Waste Not, Want Not on oil and how you can make yourself not only Fertilizer 1 but also Fertilizer 2 from just waste products from oil. Good way to grab a little bit of extra bonus growth out of your farms by just making a little bit of extra fertilizer. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed already, I highly recommend it because, like I said, this was just the farming video. There's a whole separate video coming up in the future on food because food is, again, fairly complicated. But with all that said, this is where I'm going to leave this particular video. As always, do hope you guys enjoyed. Do hope you learnt something along the way. Don't forget there's those chapters down the bottom. And thank you, as always, for clicking subscribe, kicking the like, and maybe considering supporting the channel. But with all that said, we're out. Thank you for watching. Do hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the very next video. All right, bye.